Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Karol Skrzymowski, and I'll be your host tonight. And welcome to another episode of Loosely Coupled by Bridging the Gap. I hope everybody has some sort of a refreshing beverage. As always, I have my trusty coffee, plenty of beans this time. And today, I think we're going to need all the coffee we can because today we're going to have a proper argument, where an argument is basically a conversation between two or more architects where we're going to discuss opinions and facts, hopefully more facts than opinions. And to discuss topics of architecture and the role of an architect, the profession of architect or architecture. We have today Paul Preiss, the CEO of IASA Global, and the guy who spent more than a quarter of a century in this field of architecture, and who says about himself that he basically pisses all kinds of architects. So, without further ado, Paul.
I think it was pisses off, not just
pisses off.
There's a key distinction there. There's a really key
pisses off.
Distinction. I want to point that out, right? There's a pisses off, angers. For the non-native English speaker, that's angers.
My brain skipped off. Yes. My
the implication is challenges, not dismisses. Anyway, it's fine. Okay, enough. Still,
good evening.
Was quite good. Good evening. It's a good way to start. I like it.
Good. We're starting with a bang. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself. I believe not everybody in the audience, on loosely coupled audience, knows you, so give us
maybe, but maybe not. They probably don't know me. Like they probably know my on-stage persona, right? Which may be a different thing. So, what do you want to know about me? Let's see. I'm a Texan. I live in Spain. I lived in the Netherlands for 6 years through COVID and some of that kind of fun stuff.
You still have a Dutch number?
What's that?
You still have a Dutch number?
I do not. I have a Dutch phone number, but I don't have a Dutch legal number, which is weird because I still have a Dutch business. And it's like all complex delivery, right? It takes multiple stages of crazy before you actually get to something that's workable. So one day I will fully be moved to Spain. But no, what do you want to know about me? So I did this 25. Well, in February, it will be 25 years that I've been doing architecture as a profession, architecture communities. What does it take to make an architect? How do you, I said many years ago, I read something that changed my whole life. So I was a chief architect at Dell. I was a chief architect for an early SaaS digital asset management company. I did a bunch of development work and software architecture work for companies all over the world. And then, and I was a chief architect very young. I was 27 in an international multinational. And so I was also customer focused, right? Dell's online store is a product that sells computers directly to customers. So I didn't work for IT. I was transformational before that was a word, right? I was the business, just like all other business units were. I was just a tech leader in a bit for the business unit. Yeah. So it shaped my whole universe about thinking about architecture because I didn't ever sit around and wait for requirements. I was in there with business stakeholders going, what the hell do we do in the online store for this product? And how do we get this discount to this kind of customer? And what's our margin and what's our mix? And how do we deal with this? And what can software do today that will change the way we did that, right? So it was just
basically you were the odd one out, right there in the group.
Yeah, and this was before there was an odd one, right? It was like we didn't have it was just the internet was just now doing business. Like big companies were, like Dell had an online store for about 5 years before, 6 years before that, so, somewhere in there. But there was no predisposed thinking. There was no agility. We had iterative development and, circular development or secular kind of development, but it wasn't none of this this huge corpus of crap that you get on LinkedIn and articles that didn't exist. It was, what are you? I don't know. I want to be called. They asked me what job I wanted, and I said chief architect, right? And I went, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Before it had any tangible meaning in egocentric nomenclature.
Yeah, and so somewhere I moved back after I had a daughter, and I read and I realized, because I moved all over the world, Southeast Asia and Europe and all that stuff, and I realized I just didn't have a network of architects. I didn't know any other architects, right? Back in Austin when we moved back there, because to raise my daughter, and so I started a user group. Like, that was all I meant to do, man. I did not mean to start a freaking international profession of architecture. I was like, I just want to hang out with architects at dinner and get some nice speakers,
Yeah.
So yeah, but I read something after doing that, and it was how the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, got started. And when I read it, it just changed my whole world. I remember it like clear as day. It was like 6 a.m. I was online. I was doing some research in professions. And the question I asked was really different. I didn't ask, what is architecture? I didn't really care about that answer, because it didn't make sense to me that we were going to answer, one person was going to answer that. It made sense. What I asked was what resonated with me is, how did doctors get good? Right? How did we go from killing more patients than we saved to a stable way of producing high quality board certified surgeons that can replace a heart? How did we go from ancient medicine to today, And the answer shook my world, because it had nothing to do with thought leadership, and it had nothing to do with doctors, promoted themselves and whatever, and they none of the stuff we hear. It wasn't trends. What they did was they got together and they said, we're going to define, how do you make a good doctor? Forget the definition of medicine, right? Forget the definition of architecture. So we went and changed the nature. We said, okay, let's go find hundreds of good architects and then figure out what they went through to become good architects. If you can repeat that, you get a good architect every time. It's not some nice little one-liner on a magazine print or headline. It's literally, if you repeat those experiences and that learning over a certain period of time, you get the same result. So that was kind of my claim to fame. So the American Institute of Architects, it was 14 people in New York City, got together in a room and went, nobody knows what we do. We have no standards. Anybody can call themselves an architect. The vendors are controlling the dialogue. Everything's a trend. Buildings are falling over left and right. It basically sounds exactly like our complaints today. So that's
pretty much.
So I basically just stole from them. I went, okay, if it's good enough for doctors and building architects, then let's just do the same thing for our version of architects. And I piss off all the architects in the world is because I come at them and I say, look, show me your credentials, show me your education career path, because I don't care what you claim to be. I care about your competency measures and how those were validated. Nothing else matters. I don't care what your title is. Call yourself Chief Fluffy Bunny. I don't care. If you've got the competencies, you're good. You're in. Yeah. And those are measurable.
Okay.
So that was me. That was Paul. That's what I'm obsessed with. Yeah.
Okay. So to touch upon your obsession and your personal mission in architecture, what would you say that this what we're experiencing now as a profession? What's the core problem, and why do we need that unification, that bonding together?
So I look at forces in the industry more than I look at individual claims, right? So there's a few. So first we have to consider who gets in the club. Yeah, we got to look at what are the forces we're looking at. So There are, broadly speaking, 5 big tribes of architecture. Yeah.
Okay.
These tribes look a lot like tribes. Like they have their own religions, they have their own language, they have their own popularity. Who's the leaders of the tribe? They go to war with the other tribes quite regularly, right? Both inside of companies and outside. They have their own politics. They have their own external facing marketing teams that are sort of self-appointed. And so when you think about that, you've got a business architecture community. Yeah. You've got a software architect community, the one that you and I kind of dance around. You've got a cloud, what we call an infrastructure architect community that includes cloud, data center, operations, network, device management, that kind of thing, hardware. You've got a data or information group of architects. That one is the most poorly understood tribe. They're kind of diversified, and they're not really a single tribe. You've got enterprise architects, which is a much smaller tribe, but it's unbelievably vocal.
True.
It's a tiny fraction of the architect profession, but they are absolutely mobile about broadcasting why enterprise architecture is the best thing ever. Yeah. And then you've got another tribe that we never talk to, but I have met with many, many, many times, and that is the systems architects. So those are people that work at Chevron and Volvo and, Northrop Grumman and the defense industry throughout the world and security of our countries and ASML, right? And they don't talk to any of those other architects. To them, none of those other architects are actually architects. So these are hardcore mechanical, electrical engineers who have graduated to a systems architect, but they are by far PE style engineers. Yeah. So those tribes are all at war with each other, even when they work for the same company.
Because each one pulling in different directions.
Yeah, and each one of them wants their identity to be duplicated on the other tribe.
Okay.
So the biggest threat to architecture, because the largest tribe in the world of architects the largest two were, when I started, software architects and systems architects, believe it or not. And there is some crossover between those two, but not as much as you think, right? Software systems architects who do software are mostly embedded, big hardcore defense systems, things like that. And it is just not a crossover into IT thinking. They don't do microservices in this, that's just stupid. Right. They do in
but
some
they do EDA.
What's that?
But they do EDA.
Yeah, well, because this is what we were talking about before the thing, right? Because EDA is not new. I mean, we've been doing pub sub in events since, we invented computers pretty close, right? I mean, there was no other way to get things across pipelines, not to mention real-time systems have been using events forever, right?
I mean, I don't recall, but MOM, as a message-oriented middleware, is definitely older than 30 years right now.
So we had MOA, right? So I did talks on message-oriented architectures at IASA. We've held those conferences on message-oriented. My friend, Angela Yoakum, who is an unbelievable CIO now, but was a great architect and helped us kind of define. She wrote a book on event-driven architecture in 2005 or something, this is my point. We are tribes. We are not a profession. We are in no way close to a profession. We are still in the dark ages, right? And this is why I piss off all architects equally, because fundamentally, I don't care what your title is. I have no idea whether you're good or not. Yeah. If I'm talking to a random person. Like Joe walks up to me and says, "Hi, I'm a senior architect." And I go, "Whatever," right? I have no proof. It's just their opinion and their boss's opinion. And maybe Joe has, damning evidence of their boss, stealing money from the company. And that's how he got the title. I don't know, like.
Yeah, but to that extent, you're right. This is purely based on opinion.
Yeah, it's, well, not opinion, popularity too. Right. So I got my chief architect title because I did a really good project that made Dell a lot of money. And my boss came over and said, "What title do you want?" And I went, "Oh, chief architect." Yeah, cool. Right. So I went from I don't know what you'd call it, nurse to chief of medicine in a single conversation.
Right. Yeah, because at Dell, as far as your LinkedIn says, you were a software developer till 98, and then from 98, from May 98, you were dubbed a lead architect. Well, according to your LinkedIn.
Yeah. Which is sort of okay. Yeah. So the real was I was a senior software developer, which, by the way, I also invented because I just taught myself to code. So, by the way, not all of our engineers are not engineers, right? None of them have an engineering credential. I do not have an engineering credential. I do not have a development credential. I've never taken a software class that I didn't teach.
Okay. Well, right? I have an engineering credential, not in software, though.
There you go. See? So
I'm an electrical engineer.
There you go. And you know the difference,
through that,
right?
Yes, I know what the difference, basically. And I do subscribe to what Barry O'Reilly says about the field, that we took too much from traditional physical engineering into the field, which completely does not apply to our field, because it completely doesn't make sense, because our traditional engineering is predictable. Our field is not as predictable as traditional engineering, which means it makes no sense to call us engineers to that extent. It makes sense to figure it out finally, because we haven't done that yet.
I liked the Swaybok. Did you like the Swaybok from IEEE? Because I read it and I was like, this is what we should be studying, right? So IEEE tried to professionalize engineering in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? And then it's somewhere around in there. I don't remember the exact year, so don't say I was wrong. I don't know the exact year that Swaybok came out. But what they tried to do was create a body of knowledge, much like we're doing in the Bittlebach, right? Which is, here are the practices of software engineering. Here's the mathematically repeatable things. Now, I agree with Barry to a certain extent on a lot of things, because Barry is a CITA D, by the way. He was board certified a long time ago. And he's a genius when it comes to complexity, and I love his work, right? I'm a huge fan. In fact, I keep trying to get him to come back to speak with us and do some stuff. But I hear he's a great fisherman as well. Has a beard like yours.
I know. Yeah, I met Barry a few times.
Barry's an amazing guy, and I have a huge respect for his body of work. Now, a portion of our work is knowledge related, right? So domain coupling is a fundamental throughout software development, right? I can't have an order without order items. I can't have an order without a customer. I guess I could have an order without a customer, but not a very useful one. Yeah. So domain coupling and what we call an order is all up to the humans involved, right? So you don't have, like you have in physical worlds, where you have, this is an oxygen, this is an oxygen or a carbon dioxide molecule, right? And that's always the same thing. So yes,
in our case, it's all abstract in essence.
Well, no, but see, I disagree with that, because I build software exactly. I've just implemented a whole modern system again, and I built it just exactly the way I did in 1999. Everything's the same, except for it's different, right?
And that's fine, but still, the whole concept of software is an abstraction, because it's not, most of the times, it's literally not physical.
No, yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I mean, it does involve some. Well, my infrastructure architects would tell you to go jump off a a thing. I think in software we like to pretend.
But even they started. but even they started to abstract it by virtualization, right?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, your modern infrastructure. Well, now here's a really interesting conversation. Now let's come back to your original question, though.
Yeah.
So there is something related to infrastructure that I would like to talk about related to the future, because again, I'm not complaining, right? You asked me about how I think about the profession, and this is how I think about it. We have now become essential. We as technologists, all of us, are still pretending it's 1999 and we're Neo, right? And we have no responsibilities, and we can just teach ourselves JavaScript and call ourselves a senior engineer because we deployed a system with 50 users. And that was fine in 1999 because nobody gave a shit about software, or the serious people who built software was a class of software the vast majority of people never, ever saw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, that's software that's still running today. That's
True.
really responsible for all the important stuff: electrical grid, payments, security, things that run big, important loads.
I mean, I designed software that is used literally by operations only. So never has any physical user directly.
Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. So this is a good point. So you asked me about the forces. First, the tribes. Okay. If you want architecture to succeed, having 5 warring tribes is a damn fine way to keep yourself in the Stone Age. Yeah. So
True.
the science of architecture, outside of what I think of as a few key places on specific topics, has not progressed since we started ISA significantly, right?
Okay.
We talk about decision records like this is a new thing. I literally taught my first class on how to do decision records in 2007. Yeah. And we've taught it to thousands of people. But the world is the world of architects and developers are just coming awake and going, oh yeah, let's do decision records. Those are new. It's ridiculous. It's like saying EDA is new. It's been
That's
here.
true.
Why are we treating it like it's new? Oh yeah, because nobody learns when they start, right? They don't have a body of knowledge that they learn and have to master to be able to call themselves anything interesting and do a senior job. So it literally, those tribes keep us from progressing. Now, here's why. Okay, another force, agility.
Okay.
For 15 to 20 years, 15 to 20 years, I've been listening to the religious wars about agility. Yeah, which, by the way, I know plenty of the founders or the authors, right? By the way, is a project management methodology. It is not important in the big
Not
I
from
sense.
perspective of architecture, at least, because in
Not from the
architecture it
perspective
becomes
of
one characteristic.
anything not from the perspective of anything that humans think is important. It is a project management methodology. Go do Prince 2. It is a way of organizing work in task queues. That was it. Iterative development has gone nowhere. Has literally, it's not disappeared. We've just gotten rid of the religious thing, right? We're still going to do iterative development. We might say agility is dying or is whatever, but we're still using all the techniques of iterative development. And guess when those were invented? 1999. Like I was doing continuous integration in a server in 2004, 2005. Yeah. I mean, daily builds, little horns going off, dunce caps for everybody. It was great stuff. We loved it. It was awesome. But that science, right? When does this technique work? When does it not work? When should we apply it? When should we use something else? So for example, iterative delivery per team does not scale to 500 teams very well.
No.
It just doesn't. It's not you can't be an independent little group of garage shop programmers if you work in a large organization, because they don't give a shit what you want. Right? The company isn't in business so that Paul Preiss can feel good about the code he wrote. Like it's just ludicrous.
And
So
also, this kind of approach is not feasible because there are too many moving parts. Basically, if you're running a small shop, that's
yeah,
perfectly doable. The larger the scale, the more coordination it requires. So that's the
yes.
kind of a failure of the agile methodology, because it basically says that, well, everybody should have the same knowledge, which is cognitively impossible on a large scale.
So you talked to for me, the theme here is forces in our profession. And what this highlights to me, honestly, and this is quite simple. And I know I speak with a lot of, you know, hyperbola,
Gusto.
but right. I think you called me the Labradoodle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I thought was cute. Right. I thought, oh, okay. I want to be a timber wolf, but hey, whatever. So, okay. So we talk about the forces. My challenge to our profession is to start taking our profession seriously. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, how do you do that? Because to step back from this, right? We have to start looking at repeatable successes and repeatable outcomes in a scientifically valid way. Now, this can be done because every time you've gone to a doctor, they have followed standard medical practice. And if they don't, they lose their license, right? If they lose their license, they're not allowed to, doctors aren't allowed to kill people, to kill patients. That's not okay. They can't just experiment on them. Yes.
Hmm.
So, and Barry says this as well. And one of my favorite his quotes from him is socio-technical systems, which now software is, follow a completely different standard of the people who are allowed to practice them. So if you want to call yourself an engineer, it's nifty if you're it was nifty back in the day. Now it's not cute anymore because you might be hired by somebody who does real systems that impact my child's life. Yeah. And they believed you when you said you were an engineer because there is no proof, there's no evidence required. And it turns out you're a garage shop developer who taught yourself JavaScript and did some cool demos and got through those interviews. And the guy liked you, so they let you in. So you see the difference between what a real practice says, here is the body of knowledge that you have to prove you have mastered. And it isn't Carol's body of knowledge. It's not even Paul's body of knowledge, right? It is our body of knowledge. It is, how does this technique work? How do I duplicate it? Who saw me duplicate it? How did I prove that I had mastered that technique so that I don't endanger people when I use the wrong technique? Anyway, so the forces at work on us are dividing us and causing us to get hype focused instead of us leaning into each other, working together to create a repeatable body of practitioners who lead themselves.
And to that extent, I know that maybe factual statements are better than anecdotic arguments, but then if I observe my own field of work, where I work, that I work as an integration architect, and that's my specialization, in technical specialization here. I mean, if I look at this lovely book by Gregor Hopp, right, 2003.
Gregor.
Right?
Yeah.
That's 2003. That's basically
was that enterprise integration patterns?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It has the same cover as it has the same cover as Martin's from the similar time frame, doesn't
it? Yes, slightly earlier.
Yeah, a little bit earlier.
Yeah. So Martin Fowler asked Gregor to write it with Bobby Wolf because he lacked the integration knowledge at the time to write that extensive of a book. At least that's what the foreword says. And then I got this lovely book, which is Enterprise Service Bus by David Chappelle.
Wow, I haven't seen that one in a while.
Right? And I'm like,
I think I still have it.
And I was like sitting there preparing for the talk recently that I gave for the IASA NL chapter. It's like, I never pondered how old are the terms integration broker and enterprise service bus. Yeah. So I go to my friendly LLM, figured let's do some digging. That's going to be the quickest instead of doing OSINT over the web. Just ask an LLM. I was like, okay, where does the term enterprise service bus originate from? And it pops up, oh, Sonic ESB, 2002, recognized by Gartner in 2002 or something like that. Written the first book written on the topic 2004. I'm sitting there, 2002, 2004. So 24 years we've been doing enterprise service bus, which is basically the equivalent of an integration platform nowadays, where an integration platform is an umbrella term actually meaning two completely different integration things. Two completely different architecture classes of middleware. And I'm like, okay, so that was 24 years ago. And ever since, we already reinvented integration platforms at least 3 times.
Yeah.
And it was like,
well, yeah. Also remember, don't forget TIBCO and IBM MQ, right? So MQ series had event related event buses. So they had event broadcasting and PubSub in what was it, the early 90s, where we were looking at event patterns.
And TIBCO BusinessWorks was the technology I started in, which was basically enterprise service bus, really well done. And we've been doing, for example, what MuleSoft now does. We've been doing that for the last 15 years at least. I mean, I've been doing that for the last 15 years before anybody heard of MuleSoft, right? And then API-led connectivity, it's like something new.
TIBCO's name was the Information Bus Company. That was Rendezvous, because I worked on my big TIBCO bus project as like literally one of my cut my teeth projects, straight into learning to code and as a project manager, which is where I started, right? Because I was not I was a Japanese major, not an engineering major or CS. And so TIBCO literally called themselves the Information Bus Company long time ago. So you're spot on. Like, we've known how to do these techniques for 30-35 years.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And we're reinventing it. And then another example is we mastered XML, which was a format devoted for information transfer. And then all of a sudden JSON pops up, which was a good format, which was invented for front-end communication so that we can lower the latency because we needed to transfer less data because each byte counted. And then suddenly JSON went everywhere because it's also hip and like, another hype like microservices and now LLMs. And suddenly everybody forgot about every single standard related to XML and SOAP, even though these were defined for system-to-system integration. Now we need to do everything in JSON. And over the last few years, JSON formats and JSON specifications, so like OpenAPI, Swagger, etc., were catching up to the standard that SOAP and XML had already defined over 20 years ago. Because
so remember,
we had to reinvent all of it.
Remember SOAP's acronym. I do this in my class all the time, and I ask everybody to define the acronym SOAP for me. What does it stand for?
Simple Object
Access Protocol.
Access Protocol, yeah.
So SOAP was REST. When it came out, SOAP was a very small packet. So I built an integration in 2001 between Sony and Dell. And over it, we took a non-standard, because SOAP wasn't out then. It was 2001. It may have been 2000. I think it's 2001. And it did. We literally laid fiber for this, right? Because there were so many purchases of Sony and Dell computers at the time. So this was an XML over HTTPS payload that then had an action handler, and it would pass it off to the internal infrastructure and services that we had defined. Now, interestingly, our services looked an awful lot like domain services, or what you call monoliths now. I hate the word monolith. Please stop saying monolith. Can we come up with anything? The Bitterbox defines them as domain services. But Jesus, monolith, really? It just sounds like your big, dumb, ugly older brother. Like, hey guys, I'm going to do something cool now. We are so bad.
Now you went all the way Texan.
Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, but my point is, my point is you are absolutely correct. What happens is we take a tech and we that's simple at first. We do a hello world with it, and the equivalent garage shop apps. Yeah. Then we make it enterprise ready, and then all the developers reject it because it's too complex. And they go to the next simple thing. Then we reinvent everything we did in that ecosystem. Now, I am not saying there are not interesting lessons learned along the way.
Plenty.
There are some fundamentally interesting patterns that have emerged from complex systems in modern software. I absolutely did not know anything about circuit breakers when we defined those those systems. Now, I didn't need circuit breakers as much because we used the equivalent of gRPC, right? We used the equivalent of Corba or RMI or binary protocols. We took a REST or we took a HTTP handler, but we then converted that into serious programming, because you couldn't stand up 400 containers instantaneously. So there is cool stuff. I'm not saying we haven't made technical progress. The problem is that we've not made individual capability or competency progress. So how well we use what we have is still a big ass question mark. Because again,
I feel like the whole profession is technology centric rather than architecture centric, so solution centric rather than actual architecture at times. And given that the majority of architects actually come from the field of development, they're not trained to be architects, but they grow into the role of an architect. It remains that way because I've met plenty of architects who call themselves solution architects. Mm-hmm. And those people, a lot of the times, have a problem differentiating solutioning from architecture. I asked them to draft me a diagram of the architecture, and they put me specific implementation elements, like, let's say, Azure Stack, instead of an architecture.
So
even if we're talking about a completely greenfield, so not in a set environment of a corporate entity, because obviously there it's very hard to architect because you're already in a set architecture.
Yeah. So I go back and forth on this one in the way that you're talking about it. Okay, first and foremost, there is no such thing as a developer graduating to architect.
No.
Not in any realistically measurable way. Again, I do not care if you got the title Fluffy Bunny, or you got the title Principal Engineer, or you got the title, Chief Architect. I don't care what title you received, right? First, there is no title standardization in the world. So your version of architect at your company will not succeed. And I know this because I know a chief architect from Amazon who went to work for a large bank as a chief architect and was asked to leave after 3 months because he could not function in a business environment, right? He was great he was great cloud engineer, right? Cloud developer, cloud operations master. He knew everything there was to know about the Amazon stack, but he could not function in a business capability, value-driven world, right? So
completely different story.
So when we talk about architecture, we talk about the science of doing architecture work, meaning, okay, like the notion that we teach decision records at an architecture conference is, excuse me, can I cuss online?
Sure.
Okay, fucking ludicrous. It is a joke. It is a stupid fucking joke. Because these are master level conferences. Decision records are Architect 101. Architect 101. How do I do a structural decision record? What can I assume a priori? What reasoning model do I use? What results are acceptable? How do I vet those results using fitness functions, which I love, by the way, that Mark and Neil came up with that concept. We did not have that previously.
That's a very good concept.
Yeah, I mean, we had quality attribute testing from ATM and some of those kinds of things. So it wasn't.
But I do believe it's the work of Dr. Rebecca Parsons and Neil.
Fair enough. No, you're fair enough. But I read it in Mark and Neil's work. No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right. Thank you for catching that.
Now I'm
Sorry,
trying to find the right book.
You just reminded me of that Grady moment. I would stand up, but I don't have pants on.
I do have pants on today, so that's good.
It's good. It's good. It's
no,
good.
I don't know where that book went. I need to find it. It's somewhere. I have plenty of books around me because I constantly open the book and read it.
Let's, I mean, again,
because I need something.
Your point is there is a way of doing the architect work, but it isn't. And what we've identified is so we've identified through thousands of interviews, through serious testing, what competencies an architect needs. Yes. And we ended up with 42 of them, which was a funny number for a long time. There you go. Evolutionary architecture. That one.
Neil Ford, Rebecca Parsons, and Patrick Kua. That's
okay. Yeah. So it was theirs. It was Neil and Rebecca. And what was the gentleman's name?
Patrick Kua.
Patrick. Yeah. Okay. So my point being, though, fitness functions have not. We're going to treat those like they're brand new for the next 20 years because there is not a way to evenly distribute that knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we end up with is conferences with people talking about basic architectural practices like they're net new for 20 years because we don't distribute that knowledge amongst our practitioners early in their careers before they get to call themselves. So I have people who have 15 years of architectural experience, very senior titles, who I cannot get to do a good decision record because they don't know how to scope one. They don't know how to test one. They don't know how to run an analysis against the decision. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All they do is create a justification for the thing they wanted to buy. So this is ridiculous. It is literally like the emperor has no clothes. The emperor has no skin. The emperor he's basically sitting on a toilet and calling himself rich, right? It's just ridiculous. It's stupid.
I mean, the same applies to quality attributes or architectural characteristics, however you name them.
Don't get me started on viewpoints. Oh my God.
But basically what happens is that I literally worked with an architect when I asked them, what do we do with these quality attributes and how do we document them? And then I received an answer, oh, just write whatever, because nobody reads that documentation anyways. And I'm like, but these are relevant elements to build a structure, which is architecture. How can I disregard those, right?
Well, and so this bothers me because we on the technical, so we as technologists like to pretend we're scientists, right?
To an extent.
Well, we like to pretend that we're engineering scientist type people. So it bothers me that you could even make that statement, right? Now, I'd like to actually flip. I mean, quality attributes, nobody's going to look at that. So there's something wrong. Now, I don't think it's just us. So I am not a technologist hater. Yeah, I love being a geek. I love writing code. I love software architecture. I love the science of our work, and I love the art of it as well. I love to build great working software that makes people happy. But here's the other thing I love, right? And that we don't have even a little bit distributed in the people that call themselves architects, software architects, and infrastructure architects particularly. And that is business skills. So one of the things we validated early on was we went to about 200 people who were unbelievably successful practicing architects across industries. So these are banks. This is Microsoft. This is Dell. This is, there was no real Amazon architects at that time. So this is big banks. This is airlines. This is all this kind of people. Yeah. Even the guy from Disney was in the original 200 group. Yeah. And we asked them a series of focus group questions, which are not what is architecture, because that gets you stupid results, right? Asking what is architecture is like asking why you like the flavor of lemon. It just gets you personal results. It doesn't get you repeatable ones.
It gives you opinions.
It gives you opinions, yeah. And so what we did was said, okay, what skills do you use every day to be successful, and when did you acquire them? What point in your career? So not only when did you acquire them, but when did you improve them. Like, which skills did you need the most mid-career? Which skills did you need the most late career? Then we sent that out to like 4,000 people and did survey after survey of them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What we found was, I mean, no arguments. There was literally, the facts spoke for themselves. There were 5 types, what we call the 5 pillars of skills. As long as you had all 5, you were a successful architect. It was just insane. Now, 3 of them we talk about in modern software architecture commercials, which is what I call events and conferences. Yeah. One is quality attributes. One is IT environment, what we tend to call T-shaped skills or cross-cutting skills, or, multifaceted skills or whatever. Somebody called them tree-shaped skills, which I thought was quite cute. Okay, the other is the design. So we talk about design, IT environment, and quality attributes for architects. And that makes you an architect. What we found is, with those by themselves, you can be a really good developer, a really good operations person, a really good infrastructure engineer even. If you have those 3, you start looking more like an engineer. Quality attributes and cross-cutting technical or IT environment skills gives you pretty interesting engineering results. We actually found 2 categories that do not exist in the conversations in the technical community as often as they should. One is human dynamics. That's starting to get popular again, but that's people skills. It's human skills. It's how do I not piss off my audience every time, or use, or do that on purpose to get a result. The second one is business skills, or what we call business technology strategy. And it is a set of business skills that allow, and this was, I have to tell you, man, over the last 10 years, I've discovered evidence that is demonstrable why these skills are useful, even in the most detailed technical conversation. Business skills make you make different technology decisions. You actually fundamentally will look at an integration pattern in a different way and create a different design, because you know how the customer why the customer likes to order at 2 a.m., flights or something. And that business knowledge means you design systems differently.
Very true.
Yeah.
That's why we're teaching integration architecture combined with DDD, because that business knowledge actually directly translates to whatever we're doing over.
I like DDD, but I don't like it for intent. Now, I interviewed Eric Evans when he first came out with DDD, right? And we were actually driving around in his little convertible. It was super fun. He's a great guy, amazing guy. But what I don't like is, first of all, love it. It's not, let me not say what I don't like. What I like about DDD is it takes us towards intent.
Yeah.
Right? So when we look at bounded context, we look at domains, we look at aggregates, we do start to understand entity thinking better in an organization. But entity and information structure thinking are not intent, right? They're definitional by nature. Now, the events do give us some aspect of that.
But Paul, to that extent, you're focusing now on tactical DDD, which is closer to code than anything related to business. And then if you go to strategic DDD, that's a lot more about intent and business, to be fair.
So again, though, this is why I don't like what we're doing. We're doing it again. We're reframing things we've known how to do in our favorite authors' presentation bullshit, so that we can have a fad to follow. Right?
Yeah.
We have known
the
business architects defined business capabilities and business capability value streams decades ago. We don't need to reinvent those concepts and call them something else, right? Strategic DDD is not a thing that any business executive gives a shit about.
All right, Paul, just to be clear, value streams are important part in DDD. DDD is not about redefining these things. It's about putting emphasis on cross-cutting over all the layers. So if you look, for example, at the book of Gregor Hopp, the software architect elevator, where Gregor states that you need to ride that elevator up and down from business down to the plumbing thing, whatever engineering, development, operations, and back up and all the way, stop at
So
different levels. This is exactly the same. Conceptually,
again,
it's
though,
exactly the same.
again, you can't sell ice to an Eskimo, man, right? You can't teach grandpa how to saw wood, right? Here's the deal. We had the so when I started as an architect, we had a common saying, which was from basement to boardroom.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Gregor wrote that down. He took that common saying and he turned it to the architect elevator. However, neither of those are scientifically evidenced concepts that how
True.
we modify architectural artifacts across different concepts. So
because
the concept
because those do not say about the sciences of architecture, they say about the ways of working.
No, but again, that's, if you said that in a medical environment, everybody would be dead. We don't do professions that way. That is how you do popularity contexts. This is how we
Okay.
evolve into conversations about non-provable religious beliefs. This is where agility was for the last 10 years, right? Our stand-up's good. Who cares? Well, which stand-up do you mean? Are we doing, Scrum stand-ups? Are we doing hypoallergenic stand-ups? I don't care, right? Kanban, are we doing... Okay, so first and foremost, scope of decision and scope of practice are a definable thing. You and I have had this conversation. Ecosystem, enterprise, capability, domain, platform, product. There are roughly 13 scopes that some architects work in. By the way, junior architects are not allowed to work in top-level scopes in any way, shape, or form, because they do not understand even the fundamentals and how it morphs the work we have to do to fundamentally move. So when we teach everybody, oh, you got to ride the elevator, man, you got to get up to the executive level, you're literally we are screwing the whole model based off of a religious fervor, a hype saying, instead of teaching, okay, here are how requirements change and what they look like from a project level of scope to a platform level of scope. Yeah. Here's the fundamental difference between a high-scoped decision record, often called a principle. A principle, and there are a set of common principles that we can name that we pretend are real, but we have not scientifically proven they are real principles, because not everybody knows how to fucking do them, let's be honest. Yeah.
True.
And we don't even know if they work. Really. Not really, no. Like, if I had to go demonstrate what a modular monolith is in an actual provable way for a PhD dissertation, I would be hard-pressed to know what to cite. Yeah, it is a lot of balloon-based hyperbola that we get at conferences because people want you to buy. And here's where really the secret sauce comes in. Our vendor community sells us crap. They want to sell us more crap. They have billion-dollar marketing departments, so they can sell us more crap.
True.
Hype is good for crap sales.
Very true. And we've seen that all over the place. Yeah. Every single part of the industry. When I started Bridging the Gap those 3 years ago, we've been talking, okay, who's teaching integration architecture? We did our research. Nobody's teaching integration architecture. You can learn about some sort of integration architecture from iPaaS vendors.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but they only teach us to the extent they can deliver technology-wise. How is that even close to architecture?
I'd like to tell you a direct quote from a major vendor architect. I was doing a talk. This is a household name vendor. Everybody would say they don't trust them, but they of course buy them heaps and loads because you don't go wrong with going with this vendor's name. Yeah. Okay. I went in and spoke to their customer-facing architects, the ones that actually deal with customers every day. And it was a closed-door session, and that was important to them because the first question they asked me when I got done presenting this kind of skills and what they needed to learn was, okay, what can you do about my sales manager who forces me to lie to our customers?
There we go. Yeah, and we see that also further on than in marketing, etc. Because if I look at the marketing of major technology vendors that I'm accustomed to because I work with those technologies, half of the stuff that they're saying is basically half truths or lies.
So, and I don't want this to be a bitch session, right? It needs to be an inspiration session, right? So the inspiration here is this was true in all major technical advances in society. Okay. Every time we advance technically, medically, industrial revolution, all that kind of stuff, there were a huge number of people that took advantage of the population for a long time until what? There was one thing that changes this in each one of these instances. And by the way, it's not just technology, also finance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so each time a class of professional emerges that becomes a trusted advisor and becomes liable for decisions related to very specific controlled environments, not all decisions. I don't want to be architects be God. It's not some stupid ego trip. It is,
No.
there is a class of things that I can go to jail for if we do them wrong. If we do them and they hurt something, if you can prove that I hurt somebody with that decision, or we did, I lose my license at a minimum. Yeah. And I can never do it again. And that creates a trust relationship and a depth of practice. That means you can go to a doctor and tell them what's wrong and not worry about what you tell them. Yeah. You can generally, at least compared to the 1850s, get really, really good care. Yeah. It
True.
creates a class of individuals who are responsible. Therefore, they can. So I told the guy this: if we had a profession, your salespeople would not be allowed to have influence over a decision record that impacted your clients. It would be illegal. You could literally have them fired if they tried to influence a decision record that was important to your client's success, because those are a protected class of decision that are about a trusted relationship between you and your client. That is professional, right? Because here's the thing. I've taught probably 5,000 architects, maybe more. We've got 30,000 in the membership, blah, 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 Still, that eludes us. That notion that there is a way to become an architect. It takes about 5 years to 7 to do it well, depending on your starting point. It is not an overnight thing. You don't get extra points because you've written code for 10 years. Yeah. Maybe you're good at some code things, but let me tell you, I made the worst mistakes of my life, not in development, but in infrastructure, because I didn't have to learn anything about infrastructure because I was a coder. Right. And I brought down Dell's online store for weeks at a time, multiple times every night. Because I was trying cool shit out in production, let's move fast and break shit, man. Yeah. Now that phrase had not been coined at the time, and I got really lucky because I also made them a lot of money. So I got to make some of these decisions, but I was not qualified. Okay. I was a 27-year-old punk who thought he knew better than everybody else, and nobody stopped me.
Basically, at the peak of Dunning-Kruger, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I am. Yeah. Well, trust me.
But it's the same in other areas of in terms of society, different professions. If you look at, for example, coaching, same thing, because it's largely unregulated and there is very little liability over that profession. Anybody on the street can call themselves a coach without credentials, right?
Oh no, you're gonna make me tell my coaching story. Oh no!
And then so many people who actually have credentials suffer because of these kind of people. And the same happens in architecture, and the same happens in engineering and development in that sense.
So I did an interview. Okay. So I learned a big lesson about what we needed to do at IASA from a bowling coach. He was apparently an Olympic silver level bowling coach, certified as an Olympic level board, which I didn't. It wasn't in the Olympics anymore, but it used to be. Yeah.
Okay.
And he and I did an interview. He worked at MetLife, and they were doing ISA Core. and really cool innovation stuff that we got into then. Yeah. And we did an interview afterwards, and he said, the funny thing about bowling is we know how to coach bowling. In the 70s, we went out and did all the research on how do you create a great bowler? And to become a coach, you have to study all of that research. There is no art. It is all science. And to prove this, what they do is they bring in to get this level of certification, they bring in two bowlers, what do they call them? They had a name. He has a great, term to art for bowlers. They bring in two bowlers, sportsmen. I'm sorry. I used to work at a bowling alley, and calling bowling a sport just with the guys with the bellies that are just like 300s every time, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't qualify. But sorry for the bowlers who listen to this. Okay, I love bowling, but okay. He says to do this, both coaches are brought in. They're not allowed to talk to the bowlers. They're not allowed to talk to each other. They sit far enough away. They have to both write instructions for a bowler, and they bring in two. They then turn those in separately. If their advice given separately, they don't know each other and they're not allowed to collude, differs in any meaningful way, they both fail. Now think about that, right? Without any communication, you are required to know what to do with the bowler to the degree that your evidence, and you believe in the system of training coaches well enough that that enough people are going to be good that you'll both pass. That you cannot get into this room until you are really ready to sit in there. And
we're far away from that in architecture.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So your statement earlier about, architecture is an art, it's not. So we set through board. It is an art. Don't get me wrong. That's the fun part. But we've done probably 500 to 600 board certifications, right? Maybe 1,000, but only about 20% pass.
Okay.
We can tell you just from looking at a candidate's documentation whether they're going to pass or not. Now, we can't tell you. We don't make our decisions until we're in the room, and it all has to be equally defensible, and every person has to justify their ranking of the candidate individually from each other. But the patterns of architecture are unbelievably clear. We don't yet have enough data gathered to make it as conclusive as that bowling example, because of what Barry says, right? Because there is variance in software systems, in complex systems, that you can't quite duplicate an example, but you can duplicate how you get there.
Yeah.
And that process is what we're after in our board certs, right? And if you can pass our board cert, you are an architect, because you can't we've seen so many people try to game this thing, and that's why we have a 20% pass rate or 30% pass rate for many years, is because you cannot fake it. You have to have done it, and to do it right, you almost have to have been mentored in doing it. You're not going to invent it yourself.
Yeah, the process is, I already see patterns in the process over the 15 years I do IT development architecture. There are repeatable steps. Mm-hmm. The actual output every time, I haven't seen the same output twice, really.
Well, but when have we ever commissioned a study properly, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Grady Booch and I talked about this when I first started. He said, the problem with duplicating architecture outputs is getting two control groups where you could develop the method to the degree of sophistication you need would be so exorbitantly expensive that it is very difficult for us to generate methods that are that duplicable, right? Now, I honestly disagree in the long run. I believe that we have to get enough sophistication in our profession that we, as a profession, are sponsoring the multi-million-dollar duplication control group things, because you should get, given the same inputs, you should get the same output.
if you have the same inputs. The problem is that we have so much variability that it's very hard to have the same inputs because the whole everything drifts, right?
So what
I,
we're
I
what
like
we're
it.
doing
I
on this,
like it. What Barry named it is a hyperliminal. We're in hyperliminal systems. That was the term that
are these
Barry
real?
used.
Okay, and I'm gonna expose my ignorance here.
Yeah,
Does Barry make these words up? Do you think?
yeah. He actually made that term up. That was the first.
Yeah. Okay.
His
Good.
book
I
was the
thought so.
first use of that term because that was not defined as a term.
Can we
So he had
let
to
can we
define
let
it.
Barry name all of our patterns and methods because he's got the best name, man. You know, hyperliminal, baby. That's what that is, yo. You can smoke that with a cigar. That's hyperliminal, baby. You know,
I'm gonna tell it to Barry in 3 weeks.
I
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. No, but he invented that term because that term was not defined yet. So basically, if we're talking hyperliminal systems, which basically is what IT is, so we're having something very structured in a very unstructured, chaotic, ever-changing environment, right?
sure.
And that's why we never have the same set of inputs to produce the same set of outputs,
Okay,
and it
but
becomes problematic.
decomposition is a skill of architecture. Yeah.
Yes.
In our design pillar, decomposition is a fundamental skill of architecture. So what we've done and what we're doing, we actually have our first one of these coming together, is you don't have to duplicate the entire stack of skills every time. So from scratch. So what we said was, so we went out and looked at how doctors are mentored. Because what we're talking about is, have you duplicated a competency measurement, right? Do I get the same output? Doesn't have to mean, do I get the same output from a multi-million dollar solution architecture, right? Which would require that I spend multi-million dollars to duplicate that experience. What I can
Hmm.
do is create subsets of that check 2 to 3 competencies at once on a reasonable scoped difficulty problem with a predefined context. So what we have one of our instructors, Annalie Garlington, does our Arc to Dev class. So it's one of our classes that helps developers learn architecture skills. And
Hmm.
what we found was that if you're willing to write a large enough upfront context, that you can break what we call a board level skill, mentoring, down to about a 3-month engagement, where you're given an architect problem space that's large enough to test that skill at that level of sophistication, but small enough that it's 3 months and not 3 years. Yeah. Or it's, it doesn't take you 9 months and you're not testing everything. So, decomposition combined with, with a complex problem space or a reasonably complex domain space, and a business skill for value modification. I just grabbed 3 of our skills and stuck them together. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I write the context, and then I train the mentor on the expected output, right? So the mentor is already board certified. So they're validated as good enough to teach this. Then I ask a student or a mentee, it's not just a student because it's not training, it's mentoring.
Hmm.
Here is your problem. You have 3 months to solve it. I will not train you, but I will steer your attempts in the right direction. So you show me a result, you try to solve it, I'll give you feedback. You show me a result, I'll give you feedback. And what we are finding, we think, is that with blocks of these mentoring, I don't have to repeat an entire solution architecture. I can take 10 of these blocks, right? 30 months of mentoring, and exercise enough of the competency model that I can create a pretty reusable, solid architect that creates the same output. So again, you've got the same output because this person has to find that output themselves. They are not given enough information. They cannot get it anyplace else. The mentor watches them do it. And so now I have a CITP who says, no, I've seen Paul. I watched him go through the learning cycle. I watched him attempt the wrong things, the same things I attempted when I learned this skill, multiple
Hmm.
times in production and fail until he got it right. And that with this method, what we're just calling the mentoring method for board certification, is we feel that we can duplicate, that you can get repeatable results from architects if you create enough variance in the context and the output, and you make sure to rotate them often enough that you can't game the results, right? That it doesn't become standardized testing. But honestly, even with that, you have a personal relationship now with this individual. So you're watching how they make mistakes. If they know the answer already, then it doesn't, you can tell that, right? So we've seen this in boards when somebody tries to come in and game a board, and all the architects just like look at each other at the break and go, because it's so obvious when you don't know what you're doing. So we believe that we've cracked that nut. We believe that we can create 30 or 50 of these mentoring modules and actually take a junior or a mid-level architect and turn them into a board certified architect without while getting duplication. So they still get the same results, but not duplicating the entire solution space, which is undoable.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm freshly reading the lovely Residues book, I think that Barry would have one crucial problem with this.
Well,
then in that case, you're working on a snapshot, which is something Barry very much disagrees. This is the approach that we need in architecture in that sense.
So we have an answer for that though as well. So a guy named Sean McCarthy, who runs our Atlas program, he's a chief architect at Manulife, and IASA, have been able to develop an architect academy internally. That architect academy then, you guys just really want me to go off. Okay, so that's a good question. Actually, there's a lot of just like AI is going to aid lots of doctors in the world. AI is going to aid a lot of professionals in the world. We'll talk about what that means at a societal level and why I truly. Okay, let's talk about the other thing. So first of all, I told you it takes 5 to 7 years to create an architect. The difficulty is not the repeatability of the subcomponents. The difficulty is the overall mentoring cycle. So the way that the American Institute of Architects deals with this is that you have mentoring assignments, and your architect mentor in your job place, and this is also the way we do it at teaching hospitals, right? They give you these mentoring assignments, yes, but then they watch you do it also have to watch you do it in a real world. So again, you can look at scuba diving, building architecture, and medicine as example ways of designing this system. So we have what we're trying to found is what we call teaching hospital companies, basically mentoring environments where the organization feels like CapGem should be one of these, I believe, right? Because the organization says architecture is essential to our success. So what we want to do is give people repeated architectural experiences underneath the IASA repeatable how do you build an architect method. So we hand them all these mentoring content and stuff, and then they execute it internally, and the mentor oversees the mentee over a 3-year period, right, to watch them go through these cycles. So it isn't arbitrary and just make-believe. It's also, did I see this translate to the work they do in a uncontrolled ecosystem, right? Are they able to duplicate that skill that they learned in this mentoring method on a live complex system, right? And again, these are not complex systems. Some of them are quite simple, but did they understand decision bias, for example? Did they consider decision bias as a part of their decision record creation? Have I seen them demonstrate that not only in a mentoring module that is to a certain extent are predefined, but also did they carry that into the next solution space that they did? Did I see their decision bias calibrators? Did I see them include decision bias as a fundamental interaction technique with tech leads or stakeholders, right? So with that evidence chain.
So I think the crucial aspect here is to distinguish that we're not here talking about architecture per se, but training an architect. which are completely two different things, because
Oh,
a successful architect is making an architecture for a problem space, a specific business, is
so
something different than that architecture per se. That the architecture will be per context of a business completely different, and it requires a lot of comprehension of context and multiple contexts in on different varied scopes of abstraction in that sense, which those scopes are well outlined also in BTA BOK.
so I'm gonna piss everybody off now, right?
Go.
This is my job. There is no such thing as an architecture. It is as ludicrous a notion as we have ever had. It might as well be the sound of one hand laughing, right? Much less clapping. It is a useless boondoggle from the 1970s, right? That you're going to have some beautiful description. It is where spec-driven development is going to fall apart, right? The only architecture is the outcome. The outcome is the only architecture in the world. If the bridge fucking falls over, it doesn't matter what you wrote on the blueprint. The notion that we have a architecture, whether so I used to get booed off of stage because I've been pissing people off for 25 years, and I have said this since the beginning, which is the notion that there is a perfect description of an architecture is so fundamentally flawed that it has created most of the problems in our professional space. The architecture is the
Wholeheartedly
outcome.
agree.
Yeah. So, and this
Because
is, by the way, this is ISO and IEEE's fault, right? They did for 2010, right? They did this silly notion, and I used to scream at people, right? That the notion of an architectural that all architectures or all systems have an architecture, whether you write it down or not, is so fundamentally flawed that I cannot absolutely. It's like saying, okay, all systems have code, whether or not it's organized in some useful way. Who gives a shit, right? It doesn't matter if it doesn't have an intent. There he goes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Oh, is that our Mark?
Yeah, that's Mark. That's the same.
Ah,
The same
good.
Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Boo. I appreciate it. But this
No, but
concept. So think about a doctor. Okay, I want you to think about a doctor. You go in and see a doctor. Do you give a flippin' shit what your EHR looks like as long as you get healed? What do
probably
you
not.
care about? What is medicine? It is the practice outcome. It is not, did I write a document the right way? Those are tools. They are tools for thinking. They are tools for
Yeah.
communication. They have nothing to do with what runs through a CPU in the end.
Furthermore, and I think that this notion of having a perfect architecture is pretty much a downfall of the profession, all in all. And I do strongly believe that there is no such thing as a perfect architecture. It only serves in a specific snapshot. In that sense, right? So basically, it works for this moment, but it doesn't have this persistence of an architecture as an architecture of a building.
Well, but see, here's the thing. It does. So I mean, this is what I try to, I do this in every core class. I have at the beginning of every core class, I have the whole class close their eyes and imagine for a situation, right? And I say, okay, I am Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, whatever. I'm an uber rich person, and I just really enjoy giving away money for people to make their dream homes. So I have just transferred 5 million significant currency items into your account, but with the one requirement: you are only allowed to spend it on your dream home. That's it. That's the only thing you can spend that on.
Okay.
If you spend it any other way, you have to give it all back plus 20% interest. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I throw in details to make it fun in class, etc. But they close their eyes, and I say, now imagine your dream home. Okay. Just imagine what you do. Now, tell me, what are those? And then I go through a series of questions and envisioning. Yeah. There's not a least, but there is a beautiful architecture, and that is the point. There's a drawing on the back there that is about intent. The fundamentals of architecture are about intent. Where we got our stripes is about what makes your dreams come true. So who's the first person after your family and you go, oh my God, I just got 5 million whatevers. And then you call a real estate agent because you know you want to live in the mountains somewhere. Yeah. Or the beach or wherever. Yeah. So you go start looking for land. I ask them, who's the next person you call to make when you're ready to start your dreams coming true? And after a while, they all go, an architect. And I say, why? Right? I would call 3 architects and have them do designs for me. And I say, why? Is that because you want to know how tall the kitchen counters are? Is that because you want the least worst result? Sorry, Mark. Do you want the least worst result out of your building architect when you're building your dream home? Yeah, oh yeah, no, I was so glad that he did a barely minimum job, a minimum viable architecture for me. We were so thrilled. We're minimalists. We don't like too much happiness, you know? Right? We want it to kind of suck all over. That's just crazy.
Well,
architecture starts in the eyes of the outcome. It starts in intent. It starts in what's your vision and where do you want to be in 3 years?
And Paul, I think this is where we have a crucial mismatch on the definition of word architecture.
Yeah.
And that's why we disagree on the least worst, because how, for example, Mark and I perceive architecture is by definition the structure of the software in a snapshot of this particular moment where we design it. So
it's a structural only definition. So the problem that I have, and the reason I get booed off a software engineering conference tables is because structure. Okay.
Hold on. And because the viewpoint on that is that structural viewpoint, it does not match your definition of outcome, but that definition, that least worst structure, needs to support that outcome. So in principle, we agree to have a different framing for the word architecture.
So in principle, we sort of agree.
Yeah.
Because there is a best. If you include intent, there is a best. It is not a least worst, right? Again, naming things is important. And the way we talk about things changes the way we build things.
It's least worst because it's least worst based on the perspective of pros and cons of our and the trade-offs of our decision.
Again, decision record trade-offs, though, are only interesting in eyes of intent. They are not absolute. If I can put a production system into play that has terrible performance and at scale and have a great architecture, not a least worst, right? So we focus on structural trade-off analysis as if that is quality attribute trade-off analysis. It's not architecture. That is structural engineering. It is not beautiful. It is not why they hire us. They don't hire architects to create least worst. They create them to create best. This is what creates a power in between an engineer or a developer and an architect, because a developer is down and in, right? Structure and function. If you think about building architecture, right? Structure and function are the purview of, as Fowler used to say, are the purview of the structural engineer and the tradespeople, right? Electricians, plumbers, etc. They do not create buildings that we want to live in by themselves. Once you add the architect in, what happens to the nature of those dialogues is we bring intent into the core of trade-off analysis, right? So again, trade-off analysis that only talks about the stuff I see in decision records from engineers is boring. It has absolutely nothing to do with anything outcome-oriented, and therefore, we end up building things that don't have any purpose. We can scale to 10,000 users and we only have 50. You know, instead of spending the money on feature outcome relationships. So we see this in asynchronicity and connection all the time, the way we build distributed systems. I can build a distributed system that can scale in certain ways. But if I don't know why we're going to scale in those ways, I build it differently. right? So fundamentally, if I'm going to have 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. traffic at this volume from China, I need to know why that is, because I'll design it differently than if I was going to have asynchronous traffic from,
But
this messaging system that was an
but
integration with it.
I think, Paul, we are talking about the same thing, but because of
Yes.
our differences of dictionary in general,
Yes.
we're going to be arguing about those words for forever. Because from
Well,
my understanding, I'm listening to you and I'm literally hearing my understanding of trade-off analysis for architecture. And this is exactly why I would say I'm looking for the least worst architecture, because my trade-off analysis is deeply tied to whatever is related for the business purpose and intent that I'm designing for. So
but you're
I'm
not. You're
looking for
designing
the
for
least.
quality attributes. Now,
No,
functional intent and outcome
the
intent
the quality
is what I'm.
attributes are a derivative of that intent.
But they're not. Who did that work? Show me the average solution architecture does not have that intent codified in any way other than requirements. And requirements are a notoriously horrible way to quantify intent. Intent is quantified at the capability level, the business case level, the OKR level, the business model level, the customer journey level, right? They're outcome oriented. They are not requirement and feature oriented. So function and structure, yes. Feature is a requirement level specification of intent.
Yeah.
Sure, no problem. And if you got a single, 9-person team doing a simple piece of software, who cares, right? We know how to do that. That's fine. I'm talking about deeply understanding product intent so that you create beautiful software, beautiful outcomes with software. And our ability as architects, what makes us different, right? I don't want to take away the vertical lift of the engineering community. They deserve to have a vertical pathway of their own. Yes, there's nothing wrong with being an engineer for the rest of your life, but you're not an architect. It is business intent, not business intent. It's customer outcome. It's the passion for the beauty of the outcome that makes an architect fundamentally different in the way that they approach every technical challenge. So we overlap each other in ridiculously healthy ways when you use this definition that I'm working with. So instead of engineers become architects or developers become architects, that's a terrible thing to do to human beings. First of all, developers don't like business intent. If they did, they'd be business people.
True.
Yeah. They like code. They like engineering problems. They like math. They want numbers to add up. Architects live in uncertainty. We live in absolute chaos of user intent, desire, meaning, product owner bullshit. But what does a customer need? Do they need a taxi, or do they need to get somewhere? Because that's beautiful software, right? The difference between I built a really cool taxi ordering system and I built the Uber app wasn't just about profitability. It fundamentally changed the way we thought about the problem. Dating, the Tinder profile, right? That's beautiful architecture. That's architecture. This other shit is good development. I agree. Yes, good engineers should understand trade-off analysis at the cost and least worst quality attribute decision level, but that doesn't create outcomes. It creates working stuff, but is it the right stuff? That's what makes great architects. Now, again, when we work together, side by side, as equals, these two arguments, the argument we're having goes like this. I pull this way, you pull this way. Together, we create a better outcome. Best conversations of my life and my career, and most of the architects that we certify, are unbelievably intense debates about the structure of a system as related to its function and what makes the trade-offs work there versus the intent of the system in terms of its customer or user outcomes. And again, stakeholder is about politics. So forget stakeholders. User and customer outcome. People hire me to create beautiful buildings. Yeah. They don't hire me because I can do a quality attribute trade-off analysis. You can hire any development lead to do that.
And now I have a basically
I
a
didn't say
question that
this. This is an accurate quote, so I'm not owning up to this. I didn't say that developers can't become architects. That is not a quote. Please don't say that to anybody. Developers and engineers who think in terms of bits, bytes, and quality attribute trade-off analysis, being a better developer and doing bigger and bigger software development projects will not make you an architect. You have to develop architectural skills, business technology strategy, human dynamics, IT environment, and broader design skills. Those are what developers tend to lack when they become architects. They have to unlearn a way of thinking, a definition of architecture that has pervaded our industry since Parnas, by the way. And Fred Brooks argued about the purpose. So Fred Brooks talked about architecture as being the user interface of a system. Parnas, and well, previously to that, Dijkstra and Parnas and the SEI talk only about structure. They don't care about intent. The intent is left up to the people who write the requirements. So we have used the notion of requirement as the absolute law for what to build for 50 years in software. It's not. Our customers hire us as architects to envision with them, to imagine with them. They want somebody who stands beside them, who takes liability and says, I'm betting this is the right way to go. So when you're waiting for requirements, you're not acting like an architect, you're acting like a developer. When you're with your customers, when you're with your stakeholders, inventing requirements, arguing about requirements, designing the future, then you're acting like an architect. And that's intent versus structure.
so I think that in this sense, while most people would understand architecture as structure, which is the derivative of traditional engineering, the physical engineering, right?
Yeah.
We need to shift a little that it's not only about structure, it's about that, well, least worst relates to that structure.
Yeah.
Rather than to architecture itself in that case. Whereas
Mhm.
I perceive the word architecture being a synonym of structure for the most
Yes.
part. But then again, in my head, the crucial component to derive at said structure is to understand that intent and from that derive requirements, because there's no other way around it, because then there is no intent, and then that software becomes just art for the sake of art rather than for the purpose. And I don't
Yeah.
like software
Well,
without the purpose in that sense.
so I call this the cornflower blue button syndrome. So
The cornflower blue button.
yeah. So if you've ever watched Fight Club, which was one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies, I was a neuroscience major for a little while, and I loved the notion of multiple personalities and that the human brain could do this under extreme duress. I hate that it happens to people, but I liked the notion of what that implied for the intensity of what humans are capable of. But in the movie Fight Club, there's a scene that almost everybody misses. He's sitting at a table, and there's a software vendor selling them a package for his company. And this is a scene
Okay.
where it's nothing about that, but he bites his tongue and he gets bloody, and he's doing some weird things. But in the background, the boss, whose favorite color is cornflower blue, he wears his cornflower blue tie. Yeah, his boss asks the vendor, "Can I get all the buttons in cornflower blue?" And of course, like any IT developer, at the time, technology developer, I went, "Oh my God, I've had that requirement. Oh, I've
Yeah.
had that requirement," right? And so I lost track of the movie for a second because of course the software vendor says, "Absolutely, right? We'll customize the shit out of it for you." And this is the key to the difference between great architects and developers who become senior developers, and maybe even graduate into semi-engineering land. We don't really know what that
Right.
means for real yet. But
No, that's
the
true.
point being, an architect goes, "No, you can't have that. That's not useful to the company. That's stupid. Yeah,
That's
that is a dumb
irrelevant.
requirement. It's irrelevant to the purpose of what we're trying to create here. In fact, we're going to reduce the interfaces in this system by 30% because your actual customer as a company is overwhelmed with the complexity of what in this case is car, issues, recalls. So
I think that this is exactly the same as the old sketch, The Expert.
yeah,
There was this
yeah,
sketch about 7 perpendicular
yeah. I love it.
lines.
Yeah,
Some of them
one of my
green, some of
favorites.
them transparent. It's like, but that's pretty much what happens in terms of
you can't have
these
a
guys'
perpendicular
requirements.
and tangential line or perpendicular and parallel. Why can you not draw 2 parallel and perpendicular lines? I thought you were the expert.
And then nobody listens to said expert. Yeah, that's pretty much that misguided notion of requirements that
yes.
make no sense and follow absolutely no intent. And we struggle with them all the time because we see them all the time because somebody didn't look at the whole thing and didn't ponder what the hell we're actually doing.
And do you realize that of course, because we've taken requirements as this number one definition of intent for so many years, that it's literally you can't question it in an audience. They look at you like you're an alien. But because of this, we've also then assigned people who happen to work for HR as the business. So my mom was a VP of HR in a, she was, very influential in the company, but she wasn't the business. She worked for HR. They didn't think the CEO didn't think she was the business. It was a hotel, right? Sure, she helped train people and staff effectively and was an important role. There is no other business unit other than IT that thinks it's the business. IT thinks everybody who works for a different group is suddenly the business and they're all right. And we have convinced them that they are so right that they get to define everything and they don't need any help and they are awesome. And we should just build them anything that little hearts desire. Instead of what happens in real trusted advisor scenarios. What happens when you have a client, a customer that is a business unit, and they have a trust relationship with you, Carol?
Yeah.
What does the real conversation look like as an architect?
I would say no most of the times instead of saying yes all the time, probably.
But what I'm talking about when you have a really healthy relationship with one of your internal or your business stakeholders, yeah? What is the conversation really about? Is it requirements gathering?
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's
outcomes.
You're sitting in there and you're going, no, that's stupid. That will not create the outcomes we need, right? We need to go this way with it. We need to create a watch app, not a mobile, a web desktop thing, right? We need a just-in-time messaging integration, like WhatsApp kind of an interface. That what you want to do is so 1990s that it's just stupid, right? And they go, oh my God, really? I never thought about that. We could do that? And you go, yeah. No, that's actually not even that hard anymore. And then, and all of a sudden you're not on opposite sides of a table going, let us gather your requirements and say no to them. We are brainstorming the future of our org. The other thing is those business units stop pretending it's their fucking money. It's not. I work for the same company you do. It's my money just as much as it is yours. Yes, you have managerial permissions over some of it, but it's not your budget. It doesn't come out of your home account. It's like you're not paying for this software project with your checking account. You're a VP, one of many. I talk to a bunch of VPs and they don't agree with you. So creating that, navigating the fact that these are not little mini business gods who all know how to run every bit. A lot of them, they don't know how to run the business. They've never seen any other business unit. I work in accounts payable. I've worked in accounts payable for 20 years. I have no idea what they do in sales. Well, I just got off a project in sales. I know exactly what they do.
And see,
and you're doing stupid stuff.
This is the way of thinking, and again a little bit back to religions. This is the kind of way of thinking that I absolutely love about DDD, because DDD enforces the clash of mental models. So if I have somebody from sales and somebody from marketing, I'm going to bring them together in a room, clash their mental models, so they actually start learning about what the hell they're doing, each one of them, or HR, or whatever.
So here's the, and again, again, we can get into, I get into hyperbola and I get into my, argument mode. Okay, let's come back to real.
Okay.
Because again, I think it's very easy to rail against these minor circumstances. Now, what happens when you train a phalanx of really great architects? And we've seen this, every organization that ISA gets engaged with, right, is we have to retrain thinking on architecture itself, right? How do I engage on the two primary fronts of change? One is on, we call it think left, right? One is my business stakeholders. How do I engage as a team with business stakeholders in a way that creates trusted advisor status? We are not looking to run the show, the table. I do not pretend to tell business units that they're stupid. Yeah.
No, we're looking to facilitate.
I learned techniques for saying no to things that are unfeasible or bad decisions for the company. And I try to say no in a way that has backup data. Ultimately, though, once I achieve trusted advisor status, I don't really have to do all that. And how do I get that? One is I deliver beautiful software. Beautiful software. I envision with them. I build them more than they ask for, and I charge them less than they think it should cost, as much as possible. Now, again, is that a skill? Yes. You have to practice like 20 skills to be able to do that sustainably. Can I do that at every organization? No. If I have bad program or project management, if I have horrible developers and we can't get a project done on time no matter what, no, I'm not God. I'm not magic. It is a learned skill set.
Yeah,
it takes roughly 5 to 7 years. Yeah, well, actually, they're known too, right? There are 42 competencies in the 5 pillars. You need to learn about, you need to master about half of each of those 5 pillars. So you call it 20 competencies that you develop over 5 to 7 years, and you will be a solid architect. You won't be able to solve every problem, just like no doctor can solve every medical problem. Yeah. But you will be a solid architect. So let's not make this into magic. It is a learned skill set, and we can repeat that in someone who's dedicated to learning it. 2, I don't pretend that one loss with one stakeholder is the global, like I envision the practice I want at a company, not the practice I have. And by working together across a network of architects, we can change what architecture means at any company. It may take us 2 years to do it, but with appropriate focus on skills development, with the appropriate vision of what architects can actually accomplish. We're not gods and we're not peons. We are professionals that deliver a primary value proposition. We do not oversee development. We are not over developers. We are not better than developers. We are different. Even software architects, the great ones, are just different. We work side by side with peers in development or engineering, if you want to call it that. Yeah. And we create amazing outcomes together, because I'll tell you, I need someone who thinks down and in, who thinks function and structure. Otherwise, I create beautiful bridges that fall over.
It's a collaborative effort. It's no way around it. It's a
collaborative effort. Absolutely. Here's the other thing I need, though.
The one phrase that I heard quite often within the community of practice of architects within Capgemini is, architects are like wolves. They hunt in packs.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a lone wolf. That's just pure and utter fairy tale. It doesn't exist. I like that. Right? Architects are like wolves. They need a pack to be able to function properly and deliver value.
So I struggle with this one, okay? Because here's the thing. I like to facilitate, but when did you build a system that you felt was yours the most, right? That you felt so deeply proud that your vision was reflected in that system?
In 15 years?
Yeah. Just whenever. Like what? Never. Okay. So this is one of the things that I think is different when I talk to architects that work at SaaS startups that do their own product, that work in consultative environments where the client wants you to be smarter than them, that work in product companies, or that have championed their own systems internally, and that was their bridge to architecture. So they effectively championed a business case themselves and got it built and stuff that become what we often lovingly call product architects, but I think is beyond that, right? Where they personally own as much of the business vision as their business partners do, or they feel that they're equally invested in that business vision. And what I
Right.
hear from those is a really different, it's not lone wolf in any way. In fact, those people are often unbelievably humble people. Oh, I got this idea from Susie in finance, or I got that idea from the tech lead. This is a group thing. But what you notice about their systems is they look like them, right? So it's like, I could tell you a Frank Lloyd Wright building, right? Because it looks like Frank Lloyd Wright built it. There's a style that we end up with. So you hire me because for example, I did a lot of retail. And I really loved retail environments because you could be really experimental with tech. When you work as an architect that does a lot of innovation, and you work in a place that supports that, you become a different kind of architect, right? It's less facilitation and a lot more vision, right? A lot more, here's where I see us going, right? Here's where I'm trying to take us. And those are both valid career paths. I don't want to say one is better than the other. I do think architects should have a chance, kind of like building architects, to figure out how innovative and ownery they want, or not ornery, but ownery they want to be. Because when you see an architect working with a group of business stakeholders that trust them, and they're really adding to the vision, it is a damn beautiful thing. It's inspiring, right? It makes you say, that's what we could be all the time. Yeah. Obviously, regulatory environments or highly mission critical systems. So again, keep in mind those systems architects are if they're listening on this call, are going, this guy's not even a fucking scientist, and I'm never going to listen to him. I don't envision nothing. By the time I see a system, it's a $50 billion oil platform, and I'm designing the coupling of this one phase area with the software that controls the gear. It's not. So
that's a different level of abstraction completely.
And I do appreciate the science of our engineering overlaps, right? I really do. It's my favorite thing to talk about is, one of my favorite things is, how am I going to do? I'm working on a multicast system with YJS right now, and I have a cache duplication problem. And, it's a completely technical problem. And I love troubleshooting it at 2 a.m. Yeah. So it's not that I disagree. I do agree that we have to be masters of structure, and that takes time, and it takes a lot of dedication. Doctors do this through rotation. So a lot of people say, well, should architects code? And I will say, architects don't have to code every day, but if they haven't coded in production at some point, even business architects, now it may have been 10 years ago, then they are missing a component that makes them good architects. That is a fundamental skill that every person who calls himself an architect needs to have demonstrated at a degree of mastery that is enough that if they are confronted with a client that needs a degree of mastery there, that they can demonstrate some element of that. So doctors have this with like birthing babies, right? A surgeon hasn't helped a baby be born since med school. But you'd be damn glad to have a surgeon there instead of a layman if you've got a baby that needs to be born. Yeah. And that's the differentiator we need to figure out for our profession. We're not going to do it by negotiating hyperbola, right? All architects have to code all the time. That's stupid. Infrastructure architects don't code that much. Information architects code in weird ways that don't look like what that person's talking about in the first place. So how do we navigate skill requirements? And when we gathered that skill, How often we maintain that skill is itself a science that we can master.
Yeah, and that brings a lot of problems because then we're going from architecture to, for example, the requirements were presented for the role of architects, and at times I've seen such a unicorn job postings that it's like,
I know,
what the
don't you
hell's
love
going
those?
on?
Dun, dun, I call it the super tech, you know? I showed up in
They're
my
not
cape.
hiring an architect; you're hiring half of an IT department, literally. It's
But
like,
dude, we
what's
do
going
this to
on here?
ourselves. No, I mean,
Yeah,
this is my point, is the tribes are destroying our ability to turn this into a really powerful profession. And here's my fear. Okay, what happens inside of the Fortune 500s doesn't really matter because they have enough money to cover up any number of problems, right?
true.
What happens in the Fortune 2000s doesn't matter because that's not the big societal questions. My fear, my worry is that we approach this as individuals instead of, so you know how you kill those job descriptions? You get enough because the HR departments don't care. They don't know what an architect is. They go with whatever somebody internally wrote up or they downloaded. If we were to get enough architects together, let's take, you're in the Netherlands, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
Netherlands is a post-industrial, even a post-information society, meaning it has a deeply a high technology penetration in society. That's what we mean into a post-information one. So technology
true.
in the trains, in the healthcare system, in the
Everywhere,
paying your taxes, it
literally.
penetrates everywhere. Okay, so how many architects does the Netherlands need board certified to be able to handle the decision records that the businesses of the Netherlands need made? So the Netherlands has 14,000 building architects, roughly speaking, that are registered. That
Okay.
is what the Dutch have considered, and the Dutch are famous architects, right? Building architects, which is weird because the buildings were all leaning towards each other. But it's still, when they got famous, it was because they were amazing. They were super cool then, right?
Okay.
Um, no, but the point being, the Dutch have decided, right? The Dutch society needs something between 14,000 and 20,000 building architects because remember, those building architects are registered building architects. Underneath of them potentially are a set of people training to be building architects, doing internships. They don't have their license. There's a whole education path
Yeah.
to repopulate those 14,000 for, let's say, 10 years from now, 20 years from now,
Yeah, but still,
whenever
that registered architect takes liability for everybody under them.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? So that liabilities slash responsibility stuff has been worked out over centuries, but that is because the building architects got together. Yeah, it would still be chaos. The building architects got together and said, "Here's how our profession is going to work." So there are not superhuman building architect job desk descriptions in the Netherlands because the building architects take responsibility for their profession. It's that simple, right? HR stops making up crazy. CEOs stop expecting crazy when we get our shit together and stop posting. And then the architect knows how to talk to God and reach into his soul and deliver software from his knees and, can do so while half carrying on to a cure for Ebola. It just, if you read LinkedIn, we make ourselves sound like we're
Yeah.
superhumans. If you read the enterprise architecture posts, it's humorous. It's like we're CEOs with super tech skills, with super business skills, with super human skills, with super future skills, with super skills. When you interview the average EA team, there's 0.5% of their IT footprint is the EA team. Yeah. So there'll be four guys.
Yeah.
I did this today. There'll be four guys for 500 people and 50 major projects, and they're supposed to keep up.
And I love it in various. I saw various capability matrices, where it's like, those levels, like you have also in BTA box for chief architect being the highest or something like that. And I'm like looking at those and all those different criteria, those different skill sets, skill
Skills.
groups. And then I look at it, and then in the highest level, it's like everywhere is 5 out of 5. And I'm looking at that. That's humanly impossible. We're building a trap ourselves for ourselves, that we're expecting that kind of a godlike
Yep.
level of expertise across the board, instead of enforcing that collaboration so that we supplement each other.
So this is when I start saying we need to stop talking like independent thought leaders that want to sell their book and want to sell training lessons, and start talking like real professionals, right? Which is, how do we design our profession? What do we have a responsibility in the Netherlands? And by the way, if we don't do it, it will be done to us, or we will cease to matter, right? The truth is a vast number of software architects renamed themselves principal engineers because it became unpopular to be a software architect in those communities.
True.
Right, which would roughly be like, and I don't want to make a derogatory analogy, because I think engineering should sophisticate and become professionalized too. I wish they would do something about professionalization, because it would give a nice foil to the ISA work. But we need to get our shit together and go, okay, how do I make an architect? How do we institutionalize that in our countries and across our companies? How do we take credit for it, instead of hoping that the CEO walks in and hands us a big award for being smart, and then promising everybody we're going to be superhuman, when we can barely master the skills of design and delivery, much less the business skills, the human dynamic skills, and the quality attribute skills we need. And we're still sitting around. And this is why I said when we started, Carol, this is why our conferences being filled with thought leaders talking about decision records is a fucking joke. It is childish compared to what we could be doing in the world of technology for the societies that we live in. Our kids' identities are being altered, stolen, and messed with. And we have nothing to say at the societal level because we don't function as a profession, right? We have COVID every day in technology, right? CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike, yeah. We have people try to infect us with COVID and Ebola every day in society. And architects are nowhere in the conversation, in the real conversation. Should the Netherlands allow Meta to install a massive AI processing data center? What do architects think about that? What about Amazon? What about Microsoft?
There is no voice.
There's no voice. We can't even talk to each other, because we're also, we say you say we come in packs, but we're so busy eating each other's hind heels and arguing about things we've known how to do for 30 years, 50 years in some cases, because it's not our magic little snowflake way, right?
Yeah, that's true.
We have to stop saying what's in it for me and say, how do we represent and hold ourselves to a new standard of professional level capability? How do we never allow a person to get a title architect who is not skilled enough to deliver on excellent quality, but not godlike quality, right? Realistic professional skills. We need to bring the bottom up and the top down. That's how you get a profession. The rest is how you sell books and how you get to be a famous speaker and stuff like that. And I think that's great, except for it's hurting us now. It was fine in the 90s. It's not okay anymore, right? Because the average architect team is suffering and the average delivery team is suffering. And we're using thinking that went out of style in 2000.
That's quite a sad perspective, really.
It is, but you're not, I call so I talked, my number one claim to fame, Carol, is this is not Paul. I talk to more architects than any other human being and types of architects around the world. That's the only thing I claim, is I have spoken to more architects than almost any other human in the world. And I've talked to business architects in Southeast Malaysia, software architects in big companies in Colombia. The chief architect for Microsoft Azure I will talk to anybody about architecture anytime if I can. College students about what architecture is. And I will tell you, the stories are not what you see on LinkedIn. They are sad.
That's true. The
Nobody knows what.
reality about architecture on LinkedIn is just the elevated fluff that is not even realistic. These are dreams at best.
Last year, I was on with a chief architect who had a 250 person architecture. The practice had 250 architects in it. Now, none of those, about 20 of those reported to her. And she said, the rest, some of them reported to the VP of App Dev, some of them reported to an ops person or a program management office, some of them reported to the cloud VP, some of them reported elsewhere, et cetera, right? And she said, I am being so bullied in the sense of I am being, my CIO, my VPs, my peers supposedly, have basically said, I am responsible for anything that goes wrong while I have 20 people and they have 300 or 400 people. Another chief architect said to me, every one of my peers comes into my office and asks me to sign off on things that I've never seen before, that I have no idea what they are, right? They're not my responsibility or area of ownership. I have no architects in that space. We've not had any time to evaluate it, but they want my stamp of approval because I'm the chief architect. And therefore, if I sign it, they're safe because the liability rests on my head, even though I have no resources to do good architecture work. Okay. These are real stories from software architects in real projects going, dude, I can't keep up. I've got 15 projects. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to be proactive on 15 projects. I can't do that. I couldn't do that if I had 200-hour work weeks. I still couldn't do it.
Pretty much. But just of my own experience, I had this situation where enterprise architecture unit was under an ICT management, which is the executive body, not the C-level, but the actual execution of IT, right? The people that are in the trenches building, designing, etc. And the enterprise architecture unit.
No, please remember that I don't care about the title. So your local architect in your company, I can't guarantee that they have the skills that we're talking about here. So I've known senior developers that are amazing, titled senior developers that are absolutely master architects, absolutely would pass our distinguished certification, board certification in their sleep, right? Well, okay, nobody passes that one in their sleep, but they would be able to. And I've known people with the title for 15 years that should not be allowed to design a paper bag, right? And that haven't for 15 years, by the way, that haven't been involved. So this isn't a title game. It's not everybody gets in. It's a competency measurement game. And we need to start focusing ourselves on this real science movement. How have we demonstrated this technique? What does it build on? Where is that published? It cannot belong to you. It cannot belong to me. It has to belong to us. What are the techniques that we are passing on to the next generation of architects that belong to them? Without that, we are always going to be underwater. We're always going to be having to claim value that we can't deliver because we don't have enough of us. We're going to be scarce, too scarce to solve the real problems. There will always be, so a call I was on today, the guy said, well, there's 5 of us, but there need to be 50 to do the job that we have, that we need to do, right? That we could do. We need 50 architects.
I mean, the healthy environment that I still remember that I was in, I literally had 10 integration architects working in parallel.
Yeah.
Working with other architects from other systems and enterprise architects in cohesion. That was a healthy environment. Most of the times, I'm alone as an integration architect, where the requirements are we go and do like 5 or 10 integration architects because the scope is so big. We're understaffed completely.
This is a really cool area. Sorry, go ahead.
And then the other question is, how do we go about building that community without turning it yet into another certification payment pipeline that somebody certifies? Because we have plenty of those organizations that certify something, and then it becomes
So
of a
that's not
what
that.
kind of
That's
value?
honestly, that's not that hard, right? Board certification is not paper certification, right? You trust your lives into board certification. People trust their children's lives into board certified professionals all the time, right? We know how to build professional certifications. What we have to do is accept that those are necessary to distinguish a qualified professional from a non-qualified professional. And we have to accept that. We have been pushing back against certifications for decades because of TOGAF, right? And everybody knows that it's and a PMI cert and a, or whatever, a cert. Yeah. That thing was hard. It was a hard test, but it wasn't a real board cert. So first, we board certify a group of people, and we put them in charge of the certification process itself. Then we always have newly board certified people have a role in that. And we do analysis that is solid. Are these good professionals? Are we creating the right architect professionals? And we get really hard on ourselves, which is not hard for a group of architects anyway, to be hard on ourselves. So, I mean, come on.
We do that all
I'm
the
not
time.
I'm not talking about like the Claude Architect Cert. Can you believe they offered that out there, right? That's what makes us look
Really?
stupid. That's what
Yeah,
makes us look
true.
stupid. Yeah. And I don't buy into we have a paper-based cert at Foundation. We've actually replaced it now with a workshop-based cert for exactly this reason, right? Show me what you can do. You can pass a test all day long.
Yeah.
But here's you bring up really great questions about integration security. These subspecializations are really, really interesting topics for a healthy profession, because a lot of security. So I had a CIDD, a board certified CIDD, who's a security architect, say that 95% of the people I meet that have the title security architect are security specialists in a particular technology. That is all they are. They are a super deep, expert at one security technology. They are not an architect in any shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah.
We see this a lot in subspecializations. So when you end up with people like, so the whole notion of an AI architect, right, is a hammer and everything looks like a nail. A SharePoint architect. You get me started on product specific or platform specific architects. No. Bad news, right?
I get the same in my profession as an integration architect. I meet
Yeah.
plenty of architects that claim that they are architects, but they're basically deeply specialized in one particular technology. And when I start talking to them about something that is not supported by that particular technology, they get completely lost instantly. They have no idea what I'm talking about because they never learned the extent of what is out there, agnostically speaking. And it's just maddening.
It's because we use the word architect simply to mean expert. That is all it means in today's society. It does not actually carry any weight itself. And this is after 25 years of studying who gets to be an architect. The word architecture translates to the word design. That came from Grady Booch himself, right? We tend to use the word architecture when what we mean to say is design. There is no difference in our minds between the two words.
Yeah.
The second thing is we use the word architect when what we mean is expert. So an expert at software is a software architect. An expert at business is a business architect. That is what is killing. That's where the tribes form, right? That is why we have a serious identity crisis, Carol, a massive identity. We want everybody to look like, so I had to squash my personal architecture opinions about 15 years ago to do this job, right? Because I have to listen to you and somebody who disagrees with you absolutely, completely, holistically about what an architect is and take you both seriously and figure out what can we as a profession make, which ones of those things are beneficial to us and which ones maybe less so, and how do we measure that? And It is squashing that ego to participate in a professional body where my job is to make Carol more successful as a professional architect, regardless of what client you're dealing with. That is the work of a profession. It isn't grandiose.
Yeah.
It isn't about being the best at everything and making the highest salaries. This is not a union where we're negotiating for salaries. It is about how do we create a generation of architects that the entire species can depend on. And I mean the human species, right? The architect judgment is the line between good and bad decision making. Should you be allowed to put an AI in your restaurant? Maybe. Should you be allowed to put an AI in your strip club? Fuck no, right? Like that's just dumb. Yeah. So there is ethical lines that we cannot cross, and if we do, we lose our right to make those decisions for our clients or help them.
I don't know that this AI example just kind of brings me the memory. I recently, well, not that recently, but I think that was last year. I watched the entirety of X-Files. Like I went through the first ever episode to the last ever episode, which was the last, I think, 1 or 2 seasons were made way after the original series. And there's this one lovely episode when they actually go into AI and this kind of a evil version of AI where they go to a restaurant and everything is AI driven. I'm not sure. Have you ever seen those newer series of X-Files?
No, I haven't.
And basically, it's like, who would thought that this is a good idea to actually make it that kind of way for a sci-fi show? Splendid idea. That was extremely entertaining. But in reality, who would think that would be a great idea, right?
So I learned this. I learned this one. Well, it was one of the things that I've argued for a long time. So I actually predicted on stage in 2004 that one day, or 5 maybe, it was very shortly after founding IASA, that one day an airplane would fall out of the sky, would crash because of software. Yeah.
Right.
I also predicted that software would be used to with protection, in the sense of legal protection, used to invade our children's lives. Yeah. Because there is no human that is liable for making decisions that make sense and that has the skills to do so. And I learned this, we saw this the hard way, and we've seen thousands of evidential claims in this space. But one that really struck me was in Southeast Pennsylvania, it was somewhere in Pennsylvania, there was a school that decided to give laptops to their kids. It was great,
Okay.
right? We're going into the digital age. This is early 2000s, right? Mid 2000s. And we're going to give them laptops. Somebody said, and they worked with IBM on this, and this is a well-known court case. Not well-known, but it should be. And somebody came up with the idea, well, what if they're stolen? We should be able to remote operate the camera so that we can find these when they're stolen. Yeah, you and me, see, you and I go, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You're going to give 16-year-olds laptops and allow geeks and teachers to remotely operate the camera. That's not going to be abused. That's not stupid. There's a cornflower blue button. Yeah.
Definitely.
So
another example, there was a court case in Poland on the similar aspect. Somebody decided to change the way food is distributed and implement an IT solution to pay for food every time with something. Yeah. And they figured that using biometrics is a good way to identify students going into the cafeteria. How is that not going to be abused? And how is that even, for example, then looking at compliance with GDPR, right? Because GDPR requires you to have a business need to gather personal data, including biometrics. Is there a business need to gather biometrics so that you can distribute lunch? It's like every sensible architect would tell you straightforward that this is an idiotic idea.
Yeah.
But they did implement that because no architects involved. Somebody designed it, yes, and then they had, of course, needing filed in court because that was
Yep.
absolutely idiotic.
Yep. So again, I would say they didn't have an architect, right? Again, because architects bring intent to design, right? And therefore, and that's what makes us different than developers. Developers' job is to implement requirements as given. That's no problem. You're never going to be able to get beyond that
Yeah, that's
because
linear.
you can certify engineers. You cannot fully certify developers. It's just there's too many of them, and the cost dynamics of it are just completely all over the board. Yeah.
And that's
You can certify
linear
architects.
thinking, basically.
What's that?
That's basically linear thinking. That's just it. It's just straightforward.
It's linear. Yeah.
One
So
path.
again, it isn't multidimensional thinking, which is effectively what you pay engineers and architects to work on. So that's why we make such good partners. Is now I do believe. Oh, you are. I don't know.
There's
Maybe
a bit of echo from you.
Well, it's probably hint of this. I'll switch in a sec. So again, it is the reason we have structural engineers and building architects is because one is, and we don't have to follow this model. We can actually create our own, like Barry talks about. We don't have to follow the building trade. We can design it if we get enough smart architects together that are board certified with enough certified engineers. We can design our own field as we think it needs to be implemented. We can stop relying on employers. So a CEO told me the answer once. He said, because I said something like, well, architects need CEO backing. We need our executive sponsorship. And he goes, and he laughed and he said, you know who gets my sponsorship? Because anybody in the company would benefit from my sponsorship. And I said, well, I don't know, the best business case, the best business idea. He goes, no, I don't back business cases. That's their job. Their job is to do that. He said, guess again. And I tried guessing a few things. He said, look, you're way off base. The only people that get my executive sponsorship are the people who don't need it. I back winners. That's it. I pick winners. When they're winning, I back them. They can have all the resources they want. And this is what we haven't learned. We keep waiting for someone to give us permission to define what architecture is for ourselves. And I blame the IT mentality, they're the business, they're the boss, they're the company that we formed in the early 90s and the late 80s. But that culture that they're right and we're wrong, that they know the business and we don't, that they get to define our jobs for us is one that is ludicrous in medicine, building architecture, engineering, and real professions. We define excellence. And we do that. And we are the hardest person to convince. I'm not talking about self-aggrandizing bullshit either. We are scientists.
See, Paul, but this is exactly the key problem there, that a majority of the architecture body there do not have business skills, do not care to learn the business context of the environment they're in, and do not develop their social skills enough to make it a partnership rather than a lord peon relationship.
But you don't. But see, that's what I'm saying is we keep thinking what is in the way of what can be. My message is simple. They said this in West Wing, right? It was one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to bastardize it really badly, but it was one of the best quotes from the script ever, and there were a lot of them, right, in leadership. And he said, something like, what can a small group of dedicated individuals do to change the world? And they said everything. And he said, yeah, the world has only changed because a small group of dedicated, capable individuals decided that it would. We don't need 50,000 architects to agree with us. Not everybody gets to get in the future club, right? We can implement this competency model that we have developed and we can improve it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's pretty fucking good. Yeah. We know how to create an architect. We have the answers already. We just have to decide for ourselves that at our company, we're going to use the right way. We, as a small group of architects, are going to say no internally. We don't have to go yell at the CEO and CIO today. You don't have to get yourself fired to do this. You can slowly and incrementally get together with this group of people and say, we are going to own our profession in the Netherlands. We are going to own our profession in Spain. We are going to own our profession in Tennessee. That's the only way this has ever changed in the past. That is the only way humans have ever changed in the past. Stop waiting for somebody to give us permission. Go out and be rigorous, understanding, humble, but tough with each other, and claim what we can do, not what we can't. Stop claiming magic and start repeating techniques. Anyway, that's my belief. That's what I'm going to spend the rest of my professional life, because it's what, and I may fail, to be honest with you. I'm not as successful at this as I'd like to be, in the sense of buy-in, because I do piss off a lot of architects in the world. Software developers do not want business skills. They want it to all be structure. And that's understandable, but it's not true. It doesn't make a good architect. Until you understand intent, you cannot design effective software. You can define performant software, but I've used really fast websites that sucked, right? So I believe this. The business architects don't want technical skills. They just don't. They don't believe they should have them. They think that they are there to design operating models. And if there's any of them listening right now, I just pissed off all of them, right?
Probably.
Enterprise architects need to come down from the clouds and deliver real systems again. Not small ones, big ones, yeah. Distinguished architects. We don't use scope-based titles in the BittleBot. We use seniority-based titles, right? So distinguished software architect, senior business architect, principal infrastructure architect, right? Not domain, platform, enterprise. Those are scope-based titles. And they do terrible things to our outcomes. Anyway.
True, because that wouldn't be then architecture. That might be best expertise.
So that's probably a whole nother level of conversations and levels of pissing. But, I can only tell you that I've been around in this profession. I've always been honored that I've gotten to meet some of the world's most capable and intelligent. Mark Richards was on. I mean, the notion that a book author and a leader of that caliber came on to listen to us chat, to me, that I get to argue with him, and I get to argue with Grady Booch if I want, and that I've had almost throwdown fights with John Zachman, Perry from Dwayne Perry was on my original board of directors. He was one of the early authors in architecture. Like, I've gotten to really, really talk to the best architects in the world, business architects, infrastructure, information, software, solution. And, one of the things I'm trying to do is create a space where we all come together, and yes, we argue with each other. Yes, we debate these hard things with each other, but then we leave that space and represent each other effectively in the world, right? All architects.
One last question that's worth answering.
No, the mafia hires architects too, man. Right? It's a competency model. Now, here's a really good thing, though. In the system that we've designed, there is an ethical model for maintaining your cert. So we have board certifications, and those can be removed if the profession, just like in medicine, this works exactly the same way in medicine, by the way. This is exactly a takeoff from them. You can have your cert removed if it is proven that you did harm knowingly. So I'm not interested in whether or not people have good intentions. I am a bit of an amateur philosopher, but honestly, that's not my job. My job isn't to make people good. My job is to make sure that architects cannot keep doing architecture as titled, recognized architects if they've been proven to have done harm, even if it was unintentional but should have known about. That's what builds societal trust, right? So the only thing that makes you trust your doctor is that you know that they can be brought up in front of charges if they treat you badly, if they're drunk during a surgery, and then they won't get to do it to someone else. Yeah.
And that all
That's what
comes
we
down
need.
to intent.
Yeah. The worst part is ethics are not universal. So a good decision in Sweden is not a good decision in Tennessee, and is definitely not a good decision in Hong Kong. That's where it gets really messy.
And on that note of messiness, and the messiness of the profession, messiness of the note, I think we've been at it 2 hours, 25 minutes. You didn't believe me that we could do over 2 hours.
No, I believed you. I just knew I was going to be a toast afterwards. I was going to make my partner is going to be like, you're no, you, you know, I just won't speak for the rest of the night. You know. No, this has been wonderful, Carol. And I love our conversations in and out. And I really appreciate people like you who actually are open to making a difference. You know, I really, really am impressed with you, with the work you're doing in integration, and what you're trying to do on this show. Yeah.
So before we jump off the show, a few, as always, announcements at the end for those who are still with us, for those who are still watching. That's apparently is quite a few people still. So next week we're having the live stream next week on the 28th of May, and we're going to be talking about moving fast and not breaking the wrong things in the age of AI. So we're going to be spinning off on variability as the second hardest problem in software architecture, which is what Andrew Hamel law. Oh, I think I made a typo here. That there was supposed to be an R. Sorry, Andrew. It was talking about last year at DDD Europe. The second hardest problem in software architecture just got harder with AI. So that's next week. And of course, if you're new here, go visit Bridging the Gap. We talk about integration architecture in an agnostic way. We also run a course, the waiting list at DDD Academy. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet to the YouTube channel, just scan the QR code, get subscribed, get notifications about the next streams coming up. We do all sorts of crazy topics, as you see. And Paul, thank you for joining tonight. It's been a very interesting conversation, and turns out we agree and disagree, and then turn out we just disagree on the wording rather than on the idea of architecture itself, which is interesting. Yeah. But I think that's always the case. That dictionary actually doesn't help. The
dictionary matters.
Yeah, dictionary matters, and we have very different dictionaries at times to talk about our profession as well, and that I think also spins even more confusion in the profession itself at times.
It really does.
It is what it is. Really that's the messiness of life. So thank you all for joining tonight, and see you next week.